So I'm going to speak about love, death and dragons in the life and afterlife of the Buddha. So that's my fancy title. I was joking this week with a friend about talks that I give at the Buddhist Center, and I said to her, really I just give one talk. It's like one talk all the time, or at least I'm always trying to do the same thing. So you probably all know this. If you've been before and heard me speak, this is probably not news to you. But I just want to share what I'm trying to do. I thought it would be an interesting experiment just to share what I'm trying to do. So first of all, I'm trying to find an image. I'm looking for an image when I'm giving a talk. I am the kind of person who without an image can't connect with something. I don't know if it's similar for other people, but with an image then I can connect and I can relate, but until I've found the image, something doesn't feel right. Yeah? So we're lucky in Buddhism that we have so many images to connect with and speak the language of images. But it's not enough just to have the image. I also feel like I need to somehow integrate that image with other images. So let's say I take a Buddhist image. I feel the need to somehow connect that with images particularly from Western culture, because that's in a way how I think, how I see things, because I've been raised in a Western culture. So there's this journey of integration that needs to happen with an image in order to understand it more deeply. And then the third thing I want to do is to apply that. So to apply that to life. How does having an image and integrating it actually make a difference in my life? Yeah, so anything that I would say you explore at the Buddhist Center, it needs to be applied. It's like when we leave at the end and we go through the door and we click the door behind us, that click should be like switching something on. Like it's not that we're leaving something behind, we're switching something on, we're taking it outside, and that's where it needs to happen. So I'm always trying to find an image, amplify it or integrate it, and then apply it. How does that then influence my life? So that would be my first suggestion, is anything you hear at the Buddhist Center, just ask those questions like, well, how does this integrate with what I'm already familiar with, and how do I take that deeper, take that further by taking it out, so to speak. So that's what I want to do this morning with love, death and dragons in the life and afterlife of the Buddha. So if you like, that's a series of images already, and I'm going to amplify, integrate those images, and then we'll see if we can apply them to our lives. So let's start with death. So death, because the shrine is indicative of this. We're celebrating, as I said, the Buddha's parinirvana. In a way I could say that means we're celebrating, marking, commemorating the Buddha's death. But it doesn't sound quite right to say the death of the Buddha. We have this term parinirvana, which means the final nirvana, the final enlightenment. Yeah, so when the Buddha dies, in a sense, we speak of it as his parinirvana because his enlightenment, what he'd realized in his life, the wisdom, the compassion of his life, at the time of death and the dissolving of the body, whatever that enlightenment is, just goes further. The limitation of a body within time dissolves, and whatever that enlightenment is kind of continues or expands. And we could explore that kind of mythically and mystically, but in a sense we can also just explore it quite logically and rationally and see that since the time of the Buddha, his life, his influence, his teaching has spread. It's expanded. Within 40 years of his life after being enlightened, he couldn't reach that many people. He reached a lot of people. But it's been more since his death that Buddhism has expanded and spread, even as far as Germany, in the 21st century. So in a sense, Buddhism doesn't die. It has expanded, it has continued, it has amplified. So after the death of the Buddha, the teachings were preserved and passed on orally, and eventually written down. But what happens is you get this spread to different countries. So out of northern India, Pakistan, into Nepal, Tibet, China, Japan, Southeast Asia, there's this geographical spread, but also a diversification in the ways in which people related to the Buddha's teaching. So you get the emergence of different schools of Buddhism, different traditions, all kinds of things. So you can have different forms of Buddhism, different schools from different countries that look very, very different, but they're essentially the same. So there's this kind of spreading out, this expansion, not just geographically, but also in terms of understanding or a richness and enrichment. So I want to talk about one of those traditions that emerged after the death of the Buddha, after the Buddha's parinirvana. And that's known as the perfection of wisdom tradition. Now I've got your attention. The perfection of wisdom tradition. So this emerges a few hundred years after the Buddha's death. The origins of these things are always obscure. But a few centuries after the death of the Buddha, certain texts begin to appear, which become known as the perfection of wisdom texts or literature. I think there are 35 texts that are grouped together in this perfection of wisdom corpus. And they're very strange. You could have a look at some in the library later if you like. They're very strange. They say things that don't seem to make much sense. Somebody has described it as a kind of wisdom of nonsense. Sometimes it's described as a wisdom of contradiction. So the Heart Sutra, one of the most famous, says that form is emptiness. So if we have a form for something, actually in reality it's empty. But it also says that emptiness is form. So form is empty, emptiness is form. Then there's a text called the Diamond Sutra that says the life of a Buddhist should be dedicated to saving all living beings from suffering. And at the same time, one should recognize that in reality there are no beings. And that's why you should try to save all living beings from suffering. So this seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? To our rational mind and our reason, how can one thing be the other thing, but that thing be the other thing when they seem to be opposites or in opposition or in tension? So if you like, the purpose, or it seems like what the perfection of wisdom is trying to do, is to show our rational minds the limits of its understanding. Because only taken to the limits can we then go beyond the limits. So the texts are trying to attack or undermine our effort to understand just rationally and open us up to something more than just a rational understanding. There's even one perfection of wisdom text that declares the perfection of wisdom in one word. I'm not going to say what it is. Or even in one syllable, in one sound. So it's not necessarily clever intellectual stuff. It's just trying to make us stop and see things in a different way. But the question I want to explore is, where does this perfection of wisdom come from? So it emerges a few hundred years after the Buddha's death, but where does it actually come from? And the story is, and this is where we come into our next image, the story, or the myth, if you like, of where the perfection of wisdom comes from. It comes from, or it's discovered by, a Buddhist monk about 100 years before the Common Era, called Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna. And apparently Nagarjuna was by the side of a lake somewhere in India. And at the side of this lake, he encountered a naga. So a naga is like a water serpent. I guess the closest thing would be a Western dragon. Yeah, so some creature that is serpent-like, described in different ways, but some kind of serpent, water-dwelling creature. So Nagarjuna meets, I think it's actually the prince of the Nagas, from the land of the Nagas. And it's the Naga that gives the perfection of wisdom texts to Nagarjuna, and then he makes them known to other people. Yeah? But where did the Naga get the perfection of wisdom from? Well, the story is that the Buddha, before he died, he entrusted the texts, the perfection of wisdom, to the Nagas to keep hidden and secret at the bottom of the ocean until a time that people were ready to understand it. Yeah, so this is the story. So the Nagas are protectors of wisdom, protectors of the Dharma, and they keep the wisdom hidden in the depths until a time when it's ripe and ready to bring that to light and to be spread and to be shared. So Nagarjuna takes the perfection of wisdom and he makes it known. So this I'm interested in this image. Like I said, I need an image to understand things. I'm interested in the image of the Naga that lives in the depths of the ocean or the water. So let's see what can we do with this as an image and see if we can then apply that. So taking the image of the Naga, I've said that the Naga is a protector, protects the perfection of wisdom. And you could trace that back also to the time of the Buddha, the life of the Buddha. So there's another story where the Buddha, after his enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, when he's still in the middle of his life, he's had this profound realization, understanding, experience, if you could call it that, the ending of all his suffering and limitations. And it's said that after this momentous event in his life, a great storm comes. For 7 days it rains and thunders, and while the rain and thunder is coming, out of the ground comes the Naga king, called Mukhalinda. Comes out of the ground, coils himself around the Buddha's body 7 times, I think. 7 times coiled round, and then uses the hood, his kind of python-like hood. No, cobra, isn't it? Yeah? Cobra-like hood over the Buddha's head and shelters the Buddha for 7 days from the storm. And then when the rains stop, Mukhalinda uncoils and transforms into his human form, bows to the Buddha, and then joyfully disappears back to the land of the Nagas, back to his kingdom. So we've got this symbolism, haven't we, of protection and, in a sense, benevolence. So the Nagas are on the Buddha's side. They're benevolent forces. We can relate to these things in different ways. If anyone sat there, because I'm aware this could be an issue, if anyone sat there thinking like, this is nonsense, that never happened. Maybe not in a literal sense, but maybe it happened in another way that is equally as real as the things that we take literally. So this is another way, the Naga and this story is another way of taking our rational mind to a limit of understanding and then opening us to something else. So we don't have to take it literally, but can we just open to these images and these stories and this symbolism. So Nagas as protectors and benevolent forces. I want to now try this amplification and integration of this kind of Eastern tradition and kind of particular way of relating to this Naga, this serpent, this dragon. Compare that just for a moment with Western tradition and Western imagination, which, as I said, even if you didn't grow up in a Western culture, you're here in one today, even if you're visiting. So it's around. The way that the Western mind works is here, in this building and in this atmosphere and environment. So one of the images that came to mind for me, just dwelling on this story, is the Ouroboros. A few nods, so people have come across this before. So the Ouroboros is the snake that eats its own tail. And it's very ancient image and symbol. So I think it's been found in ancient Egyptian tombs and things like that, this serpent or snake that is eating its own tail. And sometimes I've seen images where it has legs and even little wings. So it's not just a snake, it seems to be something more than just that. So it's got very ancient, it's very ancient as an image. Then it gets developed in all different kinds of ways throughout the Western tradition. The one that really came to mind, because something I should have said, let me do a short diversion now, that Nagarjuna, the guy who encountered the Nagas and the perfection of wisdom, when he's depicted, often he has snakes coming out of his head. And he's in front of the Naga prince, but he has all these snakes coming out of his head. And I had an image of this. We used it on a retreat recently. And this morning I spent about 45 minutes trying to find the image, and it's disappeared. And I thought maybe I've left it in the frame here, but I've looked and it's not there either. So again, it's like the Nagas have gone, disappeared somewhere. So there's this hidden image somewhere. If anyone finds it, can you come and tell me? But it's this image of him sat there with all these snakes coming out of the head. So that triggered another image from Western culture, which you're probably all familiar with. And that's the image of Medusa, the Gorgon, from the Greek tradition. Yeah, so she had snakes on the head. And one of my favorite films growing up was Clash of the Titans from the early 80s, where the story is depicted of Perseus, the hero, and his journey. And there's a city, is it Argos, maybe? Ancient Greek city that is threatened by a sea monster. So again, something coming out the depths of the ocean, but this is a sea monster, the Kraken, which threatens the city. And to try to placate the gods, the inhabitants of Argos, or wherever it is, they offer a human sacrifice. And the human sacrifice is Andromeda, who's this beautiful young woman. So Perseus goes on his quest to try to somehow find a way of destroying the Kraken. And that takes him to Medusa's lair, where he has to somehow decapitate Medusa, cut off the head. Yeah? But the problem is, whenever she looks at anything or anyone, she turns it to stone. So he has to use his shield to see her in his reflection, and then he manages to chop off her head. And he flies on his winged horse over the sea where the Kraken's about to kill Andromeda, and he takes out Medusa's head from his bag, and he shows it to the Kraken, turns the Kraken to stone, and then everything's okay. So that's one way in which we see the serpent coming into Western culture, but it's very different, isn't it? The serpent, Medusa, is a threat to be defeated. Yeah, the Kraken, the monster from the depths of the ocean, is to be defeated. and killed and slain. And then as Western culture develops, that becomes the archetype for other myths, like anyone from England in the room will know of George and the dragon, St. George, who also has to kill a dragon. Doesn't something like that happen in Beowulf as well? Is there a dragon in that? But anyway, the point is the dragon is usually a threat. The dragon is something that needs to be destroyed. So what have we got? We've got a contradiction. We've got the Nagas of Eastern mythology that are benevolent and protective, and the dragons of Western mythology that are a threat and to be attacked and destroyed. Yeah. I suppose the biggest, maybe one of the most powerful ways in which the serpent appears in Western culture and imagination is in the Garden of Eden, and the tempting of Eve to eat from the tree of wisdom. So the snake there becomes a symbol of temptation, sin, the devil. And yet, also it opens Adam and Eve in that tradition to wisdom. So as much as the snake or the serpent or the dragon is this malevolent force, evil force, there's an ambiguity. It's also related to wisdom. So even within a tradition, there is a ambiguity, a contradiction. So I would say that this image of the snake, the serpent, the dragon, the naga, is itself an image for the perfection of wisdom, which is also about contradiction. Yeah. We can't understand dragons. That's the point, isn't it? You can't understand dragons. You can't pin them down. Yeah. So even within Buddhism you get this kind of ambiguity, contradiction. So I've told you already that the Buddha, after his enlightenment, is protected by Mukhalinda, the serpent king. And that Nagarjuna discovers the perfection of wisdom that the Nagas have guarded and hidden in the depths of the ocean. Now I'm going to tell you a story where the Buddha meets another Naga and things don't go so smoothly. Yeah. So sometime after the Buddha's enlightenment, I think quite soon after the Buddha's enlightenment, he leaves Bodh Gaya, where it's happened. He leaves behind the Bodhi tree. He leaves behind Mukhalinda and the protection and the storm. And he also goes off into a period of wandering. Yeah? And he meets various people. He teaches them. He manages to communicate the Dharma to them. But always he moves on. So he just keeps going, meeting people, communicating, moving on. And eventually he comes upon a camp by the side of a river with, the text says, I think, 200 people meditating in the forest, doing some kind of spiritual practice. They're actually described as matted hair or dreadlocked ascetics. So they're doing all kinds of crazy punishment practices, but they all have the dreadlocks. This is their defining characteristic according to the text. So 200 of these dreadlocked practitioners, and they're led by a chief, Brahmin, called Kashyapa. So the dreadlocked ascetics of Kashyapa. And in the middle of their camp they have, a small building, which is their fire chamber. They keep a sacred fire burning inside this chamber. And the Buddha meets them, says hello, and decides that he wants to stay for the evening in this camp with the 200 dreadlocked ascetics. And he says, would it be possible for me to stay in that fire chamber for the evening? And Kashyapa, the leader of the clan, says to him, well, you could, But you need to know that inside there's a royal savage Naga serpent in there. And the Buddha says, well, okay, but I still think I'd like to stay in there overnight. And Kashyapa says, well, just know that it really is a royal, savage Naga serpent. And the Buddha says, okay, but I still think I'd like to stay in there. And he tries a third time, but the Buddha is quite clear that that looks like the best place for him to go for a good night's sleep. So he does. He goes inside this fire chamber and he lays down some grass, a kind of grass straw mat on the floor to begin to meditate. And then he looks up and sure enough there is a royal savage Naga serpent inside the fire chamber with him. And that Naga, seeing the Buddha have the guts to come in and then to lay down his stuff and sit there, it's made him really mad. So the Naga starts producing smoke, filling the whole fire chamber with smoke. So the Buddha sees this happening and the Buddha thinks, the Naga's producing smoke. Maybe I should produce smoke of my own, but I'll do it without doing any damage to his skin, his bones, his muscles, his sinews. So the Buddha starts producing smoke. And then the Naga, seeing the Buddha producing smoke, gets really, really cross and starts producing flames. So he's going to show this punk what he can really do. So he just starts producing all these flames. So the Buddha notices the flames being produced and he thinks, the Naga's producing flames. Maybe I should produce flames, but without doing any damage to his skin, his bones, his muscles and his sinews. So the Buddha starts producing flames too. So imagine the room just flashing with all this fire and smoke. And outside, there are 200 dreadlocked ascetics wondering what the hell is happening in there. And one of them says to another one, that poor wandering monk is being destroyed by the royal savage Naga serpent. And kind of disappointed, they all retire and go to bed for the evening. And then in the morning they come back and they gather around the fire chamber, kind of sad. And then suddenly the door opens and the Buddha steps out. And he walks over to them with his begging bowl in his hand, he's ready for breakfast. And they say, what happened? We can't believe that you're alive. What happened in there? And what happened to the Naga? And the Buddha shows them the inside of his begging bowl, and there's this tiny little Naga just curled up asleep inside the Buddha's bowl. So there you go, that's the story. So what can we do with that? I sort of promised, didn't I, that we'll find a way of applying this to our actual lives here in 21st century Berlin. So how do we take all this imagery of snakes and dragons and myths, and particularly this story of the Buddha and the Naga in the fire chamber? I think the most important aspect of the story, or the key note of this event in the life of the Buddha, is just the obvious exemplification of love. So the Buddha's so clear that, okay, he's producing smoke, he's producing fire, but he will not harm. He will do no harm to the dragon's skin, bones, muscle, sinew. So for me, this is a story about the Buddha's love about the Buddha's metta, his kindness, his kindly awareness. Yeah. But there's a few finer details. Yeah. So if we think about the way in which the Buddha showed a willingness to go inside the fire chamber, I think that's the first point. So there's a willingness to go in. And for us as practitioners of the Dharma, particularly in relation to this center and our Triratna Sangha, we put a lot of emphasis on the metta bhavana as a meditation practice. So this is the practice, it may have been the first time for some of you that we did this morning. So this cultivation of loving kindness, we put a lot of emphasis on that as being an important practice. But more generally, I think with meditation, meditation is an opportunity to go into the fire chamber. So we're creating a specific space. When we sit down with this stuff, the cushion, the mat, the blanket, we're putting down our mat and our grass, just like the Buddha does in this story. We're saying, I'm going to sit here, and I'm about to do something that I think is positive and going to lead to some kind of transformation and some kind of spiritual experience. You know, that's what we're doing. We're laying the conditions. We're putting things down, and you could say we're opening. So there's this real openness to the Buddha's entry into the fire chamber. So I would say we can take that as a piece of advice, a suggestion, an invitation, that whenever we meditate, we sit down and we are opening to what's really going on. Because we know, don't we, that we miss a lot of what is really going on because of being busy. Yeah, like I said before, we'll go out the door, it will click behind us, and if you're anything like me, the first thing I probably do is look at my phone. I'm about to walk home, but for some reason I should check first. Do I have any messages? Do I need to go to Netto on the way home? So already I'm in something else, and then there's the traffic that I have to dodge, there's the snow, will I slip? There's walking past people at the hospital, and ambulances, and sirens, and swans crashing into the bridge sometimes, and all kinds of chaos. So it's no surprise, is it, that we get thrown. So meditation is our opportunity to experience life in a different way. So just stopping all that, opening to what's really going on. We don't have to have the same defenses. I think we do need boundaries walking through the city. If you're walking through kind of too open, that could be, it could lead to things that we don't necessarily want. So to some extent we have to be on our guard. It's natural. But when we meditate, it's like we're sitting and we're opening. So I think one way to do that at the beginning of meditation is not to do anything. So again, speaking for myself, I think in the past I would set up, sit down, crack on, and get straight into being aware of my breath, cultivating metta, and it sort of works. But I found it more helpful to sit down and just think, okay, first, I do nothing. It's like if you're driving a car. If you start the engine when you're in first gear and lift the clutch, if cars still have clutches, the car just stalls, doesn't it? If you're in neutral, then you have the choice. Then you choose, okay, I'm going to go into first gear and now I'll start. So we're kind of just going into neutral at the beginning. I think that's really important in the metta bhavana, because it's a practice where we're exploring emotion and emotional responses. And emotions are like nagas because they're often deep down. Not always, are they? Sometimes they're right in the forefront, but in the busyness of things and the necessity of closing down, sometimes the emotions retreat into the depths. So if we sit and we open and we allow, then that can start to come up, come into the light. I've got a poem here. I think I will use it. This is a poem by Rumi, and he describes the human experience as being like a guest house. So this openness, willingness to open to whoever is coming or whatever is coming. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honourably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. It's nice, isn't it? Yeah, so this sense of openness and willingness to see what's there, see who is there, see what comes to the surface. I think there's also a suggestion here, and again another tip for metta, and we see it in the story of the Buddha. There's a suggestion of a need to be sensitive to what comes. So a joy, a depression, a meanness, can we be sensitive to what emerges when we sit down? We're tuning into our emotions, but that could be all kinds of things. So can we be sensitive to what our real emotional experience is? Again, particularly when we do the metta bhavana and we're working with emotion, before we start to cultivate or express a wish for positive emotion, what's really going on first? What are the real emotions? What are the things moving in our depths, in the deeper waters of our mind or our imagination? And just accepting them. Rumi goes a bit far for me, saying to laugh at the door and invite them in. It doesn't always feel like that, does it? We sit down and we feel slightly sad or depressed, and it's not something to laugh at, but you can see what he's meaning. He's exaggerating. All experience is welcome. So we're tuning into the real emotion that is going on. It's only if we do that we can begin to then transform it. And we need to transform emotions. Maybe just being aware of them already begins to modify them or transform them. I don't want to just stay as I am for the rest of my life. Do you? It's not that I think there's fundamentally something wrong with me, but I would like to think life will continue to be one of growth and growth, and I don't know what else, but my hand gestures suggest it. Expansion, beyond limitation, less limited. That would be nice. So I definitely want that, but that's not going to happen unless I embrace what's going on, moment by moment. And what the habits are, the force of habit. So I see this in the story of the Buddha in the fire chamber with the Naga. He's very sensitive. He's not rash, is he? Doesn't bring the flames immediately. He's pondering. This is happening now. Maybe I could do this, but without doing it like this. So there's this sensitivity. So we have an openness, we have a sensitivity. But then the third thing I think that comes through is the Buddha's very clear. It's clearly love, isn't it? When he asks, "Oh, suppose I do this," not really asking as if there's an alternative. For the Buddha, love is just the obvious response to stepping into this fire chamber. So when these things emerge, the clear choice is to acknowledge, but also to respond with kindness, to meet with kindness, to bring kindness to the forefront. So I think in the Metta Bhavana we have this when we use the phrases. Yeah, so may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering. That's very clear. Sometimes people say, I don't like using the phrases. Fair enough, we've got to explore the practice. But also, can we be clear what the phrases are for? And the phrases are an expression of a particular direction. So the practice needs to have a clear direction. Yeah, so whether we say, may I be well, may I be happy, may I be free from suffering, in English, or in German, or in Spanish, or Portuguese, or any language, fine. Maybe the words need to change. Maybe there are other resonant ways of expressing that heart's wish for ourselves and others to be happy. Yeah, so we can play with it, but the practice needs to have a sense of direction, a clarity about why we're doing it, where is it going in a sense. Yeah. And then it's like we have an openness, a sensitivity, a clarity in terms of direction. But once we've had the clarity, then again we need the openness. What does it do? When we drop in those phrases, what does it do for us? Does it change anything in the practice? Does it change anything in the afternoon, or the next day, or the next year? So we do something and then we come back and see, dropping in and see. We're like, I think Buddhists are like, I'm going to say it, scientists. As much as we're like poets. You can see my prejudices here, can't you? As much as we can be poetic and talk about images, there is a logic, there is a science, there is a clear process. If we put this in place and do this, then this will happen. If we do this, then this will happen. That's also really important. So if we do it like that, then we're going to be cycling, aren't we, from openness, sensitivity, clear direction, openness, sensitivity, clear direction. It's a snake that eats its own tail. Yeah, the practice is self-contained. Yeah? It's not just circular like that, where we're noticing, opening what's there, dropping in a direction, changing, transforming, opening to what's there, dropping in direction, changing, transforming. It's circling, but I would say also expands. So there's a sense of this expansion through one's life. Just like the Buddha's teaching, as I mentioned at the beginning, goes beyond his death and expands and develops. That's what happens with our metta. Yeah? If you do the Metta Bhavana as a regular meditation practice, that will happen. From one Buddhist scientist to perhaps another. On the basis of doing this, this can happen. Yeah? We create the conditions and something else can happen. I never thought I'd describe myself as a Buddhist scientist. I hope the rest of the talk has shown that there are other things going on as well, other movements in my mind and imagination. Anyway, I'm waffling. So I think I might leave it there. Maybe I'll come back at the end with another image and back to the Buddha's parinirvana. So The image on the shrine here, the small one, the silver one, very beautiful actually in silver, is of the Buddha reclining in the royal ease, resting on his head on one hand and the whole of the body laying down. And it's said that this is the position that the Buddha adopted at the time of death, at the time of the parinirvana. And there were petals kind of raining down upon him from the sal trees that he was laid in between. And shortly before that, his cousin and closest companion and dear friend Ananda had been weeping and crying because he knew that the Buddha was about to go. And the Buddha knows this and sends somebody else to go and get Ananda. And they see Ananda and they ask Ananda, why is he crying? And he says, the Buddha's about to pass away into parinirvana. And he says, he who has been so kind to me, he who has been so kind to me. So Ananda had known the Buddha all his life, and in the last couple of decades, I think, of the Buddha's life, he was his personal attendant. He was with him all the time. He'd heard all the Buddha's teachings, and the one quality that he drew out that was the hallmark of the Buddha's life and being was that he was so kind. So again, another indication here of how important metta is, how much the Buddha is defined by this unlimited heart, this universal love and kindness, and how in doing the metta bhavana that's our direction. Yeah? However far away from that ideal we might feel, it doesn't matter. If we're tuning into what's going on and we're dropping in that direction, then we're well on the way to also dwelling in that kind of mind that the Buddha enjoyed and which after the parinirvana just pervaded in a mysterious and different kind of way. So we've had death, we've had love, we've had dragons, nagas in the depths, the perfection of wisdom, but also some indication that the perfection of wisdom is also the perfection of love, and that we can practice this on a very basic, everyday level, and it's probably having much more profound effects on the world than we might be able to see, and on us too. Yeah. So I'll finish there. Thank you.